Imagine waking up not in your bed, but in a world swallowed by mist, smoke, and silence. The year is 450 CE. You stand barefoot on a cold, damp hillside in the heart of Britain. Below you, a village clings to life. Small huts with thatched roofs, smoke curling upward like fading memories. There's no electricity, no cities, no roads humming with carts or trade, because the Romans are gone. For 4 centuries, they ruled here. They built stone walls, bathhouses, paved roads that stretched across the land like veins. Then one day, they left, called back to defend their crumbling empire, and just like that, order vanished. Now, this land teeters on the edge of darkness, not the kind you read about in fairy tales, but the kind where people survive from day to day, wondering who will raid them next. A time before knights, before chivalry, before the myths. And yet, this is where the legend begins. Somewhere in this fractured world of warlords and whispers, a name starts to form. A name you've heard before, half history, half myth. A name carried by campfires and battle cries, Arthur. But before he becomes a king, before he's a legend, you're going to walk beside him, not in the fantasy, but in the real world he came from. So take a breath, step forward, and forget everything you thought you knew. You follow the smoke down the hill, feet squelching in wet grass, the air thick with the scent of wood, damp earth and livestock. The village isn't much, just a handful of wattle and daub huts, patched roofs and chickens scratching in the mud. But to the people here, it's everything. It's survival. An old man notices you, weathered face, thick hands calloused from stonework. His name is Caddock, once a stonemason under Roman rule. He smiles without suspicion. There's no room for strangers or secrets out here. We're still here, he says, gesturing to the huts and fields beyond. We grow what we can, fix what's broken, raise our children. But it's not easy, not anymore. He talks as you walk, and the truth comes out fast. Ever since the Romans pulled out decades ago, everything's been different. There's no army, no currency, no law but what local chiefs can enforce. Bandits roam the woods, the old trade routes are silent, and worse, there are Saxons. They were mercenaries once, Caddock mutters, hired to fight off raiders, but now they come with wives and children. They don't plan to leave. You glance eastward, toward the coast. The fear in his voice isn't just worry, it's memory. Farms have been burned, friends taken, some tribes fight back, others make deals they'll live to regret. Yet amid all this, the village lives on. Children chase geese through puddles. Women stir pots over open hearths. A teenage boy hauls a bundle of firewood across his shoulders, whistling a tune older than the ruins around you. Life is fragile here, but not broken, and as you follow Caddock past the fields and into the heart of the village, one thing becomes clear. These people aren't just clinging to the past, they're forging something new in its place, but they can't do it alone. Because the world around them is shifting, and soon, survival won't be enough. Someone will have to lead. Caddock guides you toward a low hut, painted with spirals the colour of twilight. Inside, sweet smoke coils from a bronze brazier, carrying hints of cedar, sage, and something sharper, yarrow maybe. A woman kneels beside the hearth, grinding dried herbs with a stone pestle. Her name is Branwyn, and she greets you with a steady gaze that feels both ancient and new. Her dress is simple wool, but the hem is dyed a deep, otherworldly blue with crushed woad. On a leather thong at her neck hang 2 charms, a rough-hewn wooden cross and a tiny bronze torque etched with knotwork. That blend of symbols tells her story bees. For she speaks it, half foot in the rising faith of Christ, half still rooted in the forest gods who ruled this island long before Rome. She presses a warm loaf of barley bread into your hands, its crust brushed with honey, and ushers you to sit. The walls glimmer with hanging bundles of thyme and foxglove, foxed parchment scraps from some forgotten Latin text, and a child's carved figurine of a stag. Roman glass shards catch the firelight beside antler-handled knives, past and present, empire and earth, stitched together in one room. Cold nights are coming early this year, she says, voice low, almost musical. Coughs, fevers. The children need strong lungs if they're to outrun what hunts us. She means more than illness. She means Saxon raiders, hunger, despair itself. With practiced hands, she mixes a tonic, honey, vinegar, and crushed horehound, while murmuring a prayer that starts in Latin and ends in Brythonic whispers. You watch her slip effortlessly between worlds, scholar and shaman, midwife and mystic, healer and hedge witch. The Romans left libraries. She keeps the knowledge breathing. Outside, a horn sounds, distant but urgent. Branwen's eyes flick to the door. Wind from the east, she mutters. Trouble rides that way. Caddock stiffens. You feel it too. The air tightening like a bowstring drawn. Whatever the horn warns of, raiders, refugees, or the rumour of a new warlord, it will reach this village by nightfall. Branwen presses a sprig of rosemary into your palm. Carry it, she says, for courage or remembrance, depending on what the day demands. And just like that, the door flies open. A rider in mud-streaked leather bursts inside, breathless with news from the border. Half a heartbeat later, you hear the name whispered on every lip. Baden, and with it, the murmur of a warrior called the Bear of Britain. But that's the next ripple in the story, and it's rushing straight toward you. The rider's cloak is torn, his face streaked with dirt and blood, but his eyes burn with something brighter. Victory. He is young, maybe 20, and speaks fast, like the news is on fire in his throat. They held the hill, drove them into the river. Not one Saxon made it out alive. Around him, the village freezes. Even the dogs fall silent. And then comes the name again, spoken like a prayer or a secret. It was him, the bear. He led the charge at Baden. You hear the whispers spread like wildfire. Artorius, the warlord they say fights like 10 men, whose voice can rally tribes that once bled each other dry. Some call him High King, others call him nothing at all. But everyone knows what he's doing, uniting Britain, one battle at a time. Caddock leans close. He's not crowned, not blessed by Rome, but people follow him, not because they're told to, but because they believe. And that changes everything. You sit by the fire that night, surrounded by villagers who've lived too long under threat to celebrate easily. But there's a shift in the air, hope, sharp and unfamiliar. Branwen tells stories of other victories. Old men recall the days when the roads were safe and the rivers ran clean, and the children, they just want to see this Bear of Britain for themselves. That name, Artorius, settles in your bones like a drumbeat. It's not the Arthur you know from fairy tales. No round table, no enchanted sword, just a man, a leader, a survivor in a time that eats the weak. Bedwyr, the rider, stays the night and tells you more. We don't call him king, he says, chewing barley bread by the fire. He wouldn't stand for it, but he commands more than kings ever could. Fighters, farmers, even old druids, they gather at his stronghold, waiting for the next call to arms. You ask him why. Why follow one man in a world where loyalty can get you killed? Bedwyr doesn't blink. Because when he fights for all of us. You lie awake that night staring at the rafters, the name echoing through your thoughts. Not a myth, not a ghost, a man. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a legend. And by morning, your path is clear. If you want to understand who Arthur really was, you'll need to see him for yourself. Because the battle at Baden was just the beginning. At first light, you saddle up with Bedwyr and a younger warrior named Gain, his eager apprentice. The ponies are small but strong, their hooves sure-footed on the uneven earth. You leave the village behind, mist curling through the fields, smoke rising like fading prayers. The road ahead isn't paved, it's broken, muddy, half swallowed by time. But beneath the ruts and brambles, you can still feel it, the bones of the empire. The old Roman roads, cracked but stubborn, refusing to vanish. A stone milestone lies toppled in a ditch, moss-covered, its Latin inscription barely legible, to Aquae Sulis, 10 miles. The world of togas and aqueducts is a ghost now, but it's still here, buried under mud and memory. The journey is quiet. Forests rise on both sides, ancient and wild. Wolves once hunted here. Now, Saxon scouts do. Bedwyr stays alert, one hand never straying far from his blade. Gain jokes to break the tension, but his eyes scan the trees with every laugh. Midday, you pass through a larger village, half ruins, half rebirth. Roman walls now hold pig pens. A temple roof patched with bark and thatch. Life has moved on, but it wears the past like second skin. You stop at a spring to drink, and Bedwyr points to the hills ahead. That's Cadbury, his stronghold. From a distance, it doesn't look like much, just a rise of earth and tangled trees. But as you draw closer, you see the lines carved into the LA, and terraced earthworks in rings, ancient and deliberate. A hill fort, built before Rome ever dreamed of Britain, now reborn. The gate is wood and iron, guarded by men in rough mail and hide. No banners, no trumpets, just watchful eyes and worn hands. Inside, it's alive. Children chase chickens between smithies and thatched halls. Women haul water from a spring. Warriors sharpen blades while elders kneel over maps and messages. This isn't Camelot. It's something better, real, human, fighting to survive. You look around and realize this is the heart of a people refusing to die out. A patchwork of tribes, tongues and bloodlines, brought together not by magic, but by something even rarer in this world, a shared purpose. And at the center of it all, behind a heavy timber door at the highest point of the hill, waits the man who made it possible. But before you meet him, someone else steps forward. Not a warrior, but a man in a robe of rough wool, eyes sharp as ice, fingers stained with ink and ash. He calls himself Murden. He doesn't ask your name, doesn't question how you got here. He just looks at you, long and quiet, like reading a scroll only he can see. You come from a place that forgets, Murden says at last. We remember. His voice is calm, almost detached, but every word lands like a stone in still water. He's no wizard, no fireballs, no staffs, no illusions. And yet in this world, he's the closest thing to magic that still breathes. He leads you through the hill fort like a guide through a fading dream. His dwelling isn't a tower or cave. It's a small timber hut, thick with parchment, herbs and silence. Shelves sag under the weight of Roman texts, local carvings, bone needles, dried roots. There's a human skull on one table, half etched with runes, half inscribed in Latin, a symbol of the two worlds he straddles. They call me Murdan, he says. Some think I'm a druid, others sound. I monk, a few whisper madmen, all are correct in some way. He pours you a drink, something bitter and warm, steeped in rosemary and ash. As you sip, he speaks of stars and solstices, of herbal cures for fevers and visions that come in dreams. He talks about Rome, not the city, but the idea, the ghost of order, of law, of maps drawn in ink and held together with blood. Rome left us roads, he says, but not direction. And then he speaks of Artorius, the man he advises, the man the people whisper about. He was born of two worlds, Murden says. Roman blood, British soul. His father commanded legions. His mother came from the royal line of the Dumnoni. He has no right to rule by crown, but he has the will, and that is rarer than blood. You ask him if Artorius is destined, if he's the Arthur. Murden's eyes flash with something ancient, amusement maybe, or warning. Legends are stories wrapped around bones, he says. We may not choose the myth, but we can choose what kind of bones we leave behind. He leans closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You want to know where the story begins. It's not swords or stones, it's not crowns or castles, it's here. He taps his temple, in the minds of people trying not to forget who they are. Outside, horns sound. 2 short blasts, one long, a signal, not danger, but arrival. Murden stands. Come, he says, it's time. Because the man they call Artorius, the Bear of Britain, has returned to Cadbury, and you're about to meet the truth behind the myth. You expect a throne, a crown, some glimmer of royalty. But when you enter the great hall of Cadbury, lit by torchlight and buzzing with voices, the man at its centre doesn't look like a king. He wears no gold, no jewels, just a finely woven tunic, leather boots dusted with travel, and a sword at his hip, not ornamental, but used. His face is weathered, not from age, but from responsibility, from war, from walking too many miles across a broken land trying to hold the pieces together. This is Artorius, the Bear of Britain. He stands at a long table with warriors, farmers, and elders. No throne, no raised platform, just a man among equals. And when he speaks, they listen, not out of fear, but because they trust him. Murden nods to him, and Artorius turns, eyes locking with yours. There's no surprise, no curiosity, just calm, as if he already knew you were coming. "Another witness," he says quietly. "Good, let them remember." He invites you to dine. Venison, boiled turnips, thick barley stew. Mead flows, but no one is drunk. They're too focused. A messenger enters with a scrap of parchment. News from the coast, Saxon ships again. Artorius reads it, then passes it to the others. No panic, no speeches, just calm, precise orders. We move at dawn, shield walls, scouts ahead. No burning fields, those people might be ours next season. He leads with strategy, not slogans. He talks about crop shortages, about the need to repair the East Road, about whether young boys in the northern villages can be trained fast enough before winter. No tales of dragons, no destiny, just the grit of leadership in a world on fire. You ask him, quietly, if he believes in the legends, in fate, in glory. He looks at you for a long time. "Glory?" he says. "Glory doesn't feed a child. It doesn't stop a blade. I believe in choices, and I believe we're running out of them." Around him, the room hums with quiet determination. People who were enemies a generation ago now break bread together because of him, not because he commands them, but because he gives them a reason to hope. Murden leans toward you and whispers, "This is what the stories forget, not the sword, but the burden." And just as the meal ends, a second messenger arrives, his tunic torn, face pale. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. Another village has burned. Saxons are moving inland. Artorius stands, eyes hard. No theatrics, no rage, just readiness. "Prepare the riders," he says. "We meet them at the ford, before they cross." And then he looks at you. "Come, you wanted to see the truth behind the legend. Then ride with it. At dawn, you will, and what you witness next will erase whatever you thought heroism meant." Dawn breaks red and low. Mist clings to the trees like breath held too long. Your horse shifts nervously beneath you, sensing what's ahead before you do. 300 riders gather on the ridge. No gleaming armor, no polished banners, just hardened men and women in boiled leather, fur and iron. They carry short swords, axes, spears, tools of survival more than symbols of honor. These are not knights. They are farmers turned fighters, mothers, sons, and veterans who've lost too much to lose again. Artorius rides at the front. He says little. There are no speeches, no promises of glory, just a few simple words. Hold the line, protect the living, fight with purpose. You ride with Bedwyr and Gain down toward the river ford where the Saxons are crossing. The water is shallow here, ankle deep, but the current is strong. Already, smoke rises from the other bank. Another village torched in the night. You smell the soot before you see the fire. The Saxons come fast, tall men in wolf pelts, painted with blue and ash, shouting in a tongue that cuts through the fog like a blade. Their wedge formation is tight, designed to break your lines, and for a moment you feel it. Fear, real, blinding fear. Then Artorius raises his hand, a silent command. His warriors form a shield wall, row after row, shields locked tight, knees bent, spears angled like thorns. The earth beneath you seems to hold its breath. The Saxons crash into the wall with a sound like thunder, screams, steel, mud, blood. This isn't the battle of the ballads. There are no elegant duels, no chosen ones, just chaos and grit. A man to your left falls screaming. Gain drags him back with blood on his hands and terror in his eyes. Artorius doesn't flinch. He moves along the line like a weaver threading cloth, patching holes, barking orders, shoring up the wall. Then he makes his move, a flanking charge. He sends a dozen riders around through the trees, cutting into the Saxon rear with brutal precision. The wedge breaks, the Saxons falter, and in the chaos, their chieftain, a man with braids and a double-headed axe, locks eyes with Artorius. They meet in the center. No fancy footwork, no magic, just raw, brutal combat. The fight lasts less than a minute. The axe misses, the sword does not. The chieftain drops, the Saxons scatter, some are cut down, others throw down their weapons and fall to their knees. Artorius raises a hand, not to kill, but to signal mercy. "Let them live," he says. "Tomorrow they may stand beside us." And just like that, it's over. The field is silent, but for the groans of the wounded and the crows already gathering above. You feel every heartbeat in your body like a drumbeat from the gods. Bedwyr breathes out, armor dented, arms trembling. Gain stares at his bloodied spear, too young to know what victory's supposed to feel like. And you look at Artorius, not as a king, not as a myth, but as a man who just turned a slaughter into a chance at peace. And the legend, it hasn't been born from fantasy. It's being carved, blow by blow, into the mud and blood of this moment. Back at Cadbury, the warriors return tired, mud-caked, but alive. The battle is over, but the work has just begun. Inside the great hall, a fire blazes low, casting long shadows on rough-hewn faces. Around a simple round table, not a throne but a worn oak slab, sit warriors, elders, healers, and craftspeople. No hierarchy, no banners, just voices. This is the real round table, a council where every voice matters. Artorius presides, but he's no distant king. He listens more than he commands, weighing the wisdom of women like Branwen, the healer, and the stories carried by old men who remember when Rome ruled these lands. They speak of rebuilding farms, training new warriors, and forging alliances with tribes once hostile. They argue over food stores, trade routes, and the dangers that lurk beyond the forest. It's a fragile balance. Women hold power here, not just as mothers and healers, but as advisors and protectors of tradition. Branwen's knowledge of herbs and lore guides decisions that mean life or death. Children sit at their feet, learning through stories, the real history kept alive through voices, not scrolls. Artorius looks around this circle and sees not subjects, but partners in survival. Outside, the wind howls, carrying news of new Saxon movements and whispers of betrayal from within. But inside, the council stands firm. No legends here, no magic, just the hard, unvarnished truth of people fighting to hold their world together. You realize this is the heart of the story, not a king with a sword, but a community shaped by trust, courage, and relentless hope. As the night deepens, Myrddin pulls you aside. "This is the real power," he says softly. "Not in myths or crowns, but in the hands of those who choose to build together." And as you prepare to leave the hall, the stories swirling around you feel less like fantasy and more like the roots of a legacy still growing. Because sometimes the greatest legends start not with a single sword, but with a circle of voices joined as one. As you prepare to leave this world behind, the misty hills, the firelit halls, the echo of shield walls, you realize something important. The story of Arthur isn't about magic swords or enchanted castles. It's not about fairy tales whispered through centuries. It's about people caught between worlds, struggling to hold together a broken land when everything familiar had vanished. Artorius was no perfect king, no mythical hero. He was a man with scars, doubts, and impossible choices, a leader trying to weave order from chaos. The real legend lies in that struggle, the fight to protect community, to forge hope from fear, to stand firm when the old world fades. And that struggle, it's still with us. Because every time we face uncertainty, every time we find strength in unlikely places, we carry a piece of that history forward. So when you hear the name Arthur now, remember, the magic was never in a sword. It was in the courage of a man and the voices of a people who refused to give up. And maybe that's the most powerful story of all.